Everybody, welcome. Welcome to the Peakon Monthly. Those of you who are attending for your second time, we're very excited to see you and glad to have you here. For those of you, it's your first time joining us. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day. My name is Patrick Cournoyer, and I work with the customer success team here at Peakon. It's my colleague Michael. So today, the Peakon Monthly, what the whole intent of the Peakon Monthly is for us to spend time with you as HR leaders throughout our Peakon community and really share with you how HR leaders are driving change. And I'll share with you each month some best practice stories from our customers, and also just share with you some insights really about how to most effectively use Peakon within your organization from the HR perspective.
Yeah, and then we'll go on to have a look at some of the newest feature releases, what we've been working on over the last month, and finally look into some of the latest research we've done into employee engagement and organisational development.
I must say, Michael, you're looking very smart today. I think
Wharton People Analytics,
yeah.
Shopping at Brooks Brothers afterwards.
Which is good. So that's good. We did not coordinate this, that we were both going to be wearing V-neck sweaters and blue Oxfords, but that's just how it goes for today. So, okay, so let's jump into it a little bit. And now that I've embarrassed Michael a bit, and we'll jump into what we're going to talk about today. So in particular today, we are going to talk a little bit, I'm going to tell you a story to start with about how an organization that's fairly new on the Peakon platform is really embracing this being a truly data-driven culture. In particular, I'm going to share with you a story around understanding a score, driver scores and engagement score from a manager perspective, and really the importance of understanding not only the score, but also how the score is performing in relation to benchmark. And Michael?
Yeah, and after that, we'll quickly whiz through some of the latest features. And then we're going to look at the evolution of the research that's gone into employee engagement. And as my American colleague would say, take a look under the hood of the data analytics engine that powers the priorities and strengths on your dashboard.
That's good, yes. Being one of a few Americans working here, I have some very interesting American colloquialisms that I get that people laugh at. Yeah, exactly. So we'll take a look under the hood. Yeah. First, let's start out with this story about this best practice, in particular around an organization truly embracing the concept of being data-driven. So we have a new company that has joined the Peakon family, and they are a global organization, but primarily here in the Nordics. They also have an operation in Central Europe. And when we were taking their managers through their dashboards for the first time, it's very common for managers to look at the number that is that's represented on their dashboards, right? So we all know that they get an engagement score, and then they have all of these driver scores. And it's very common for a manager to look at the number and think that a number, they know the range of a score is anywhere between 0 and 10 on the NPS scale. But a lot of times what will happen is a manager will focus specifically on the number as opposed to a lot of the other information that's available on the dashboard. So I was working with this group of managers, and we had a couple of managers in the team that were very excited about their management support score, in particular management support score, because that's usually one that managers hone in on, when in reality, all of the drivers are critically important to a leader within the organization and a manager within an organization. But these managers, a couple in the group, were saying, "Oh, my manager support score is high. It's an 8.1." Yeah. And I was like, that is a quote unquote good score. I mean, we don't really talk about scoring in good or bad, but it is on the higher end of the scale. But I said, let's keep reading across this and let's really understand what the benchmark is actually for the management support score, for the management support driver. And in reality, the management support driver score for the organization was at an 8.9. So the manager kind of, yeah, exactly. But the manager kind of stopped for a second and said, so my score is 8.1. Maybe there were a couple of them. One is 8.0, 8.1, 8.2, and they all kind of were like, I'm doing really great here. And then as we started to get into it and they started to understand that in reality, the rest of the organization was actually performing at quite a higher level when it came to the management support driver. And they, at first, like Michael said, the air was taken out of the balloon a little bit, but then they were like, wow, this is very interesting, because if I would have just concentrated on the number, on the score, I would have thought that I was doing great at management support, that I didn't really need to work on that or have that as an area of concentration, when in reality, my peers in the organization or other managers in the organization are actually, or their teams are actually rating their satisfaction with this driver higher. So they fully embraced the fact that they needed to work in these areas and they needed to look beyond the number and really understand a more objective perspective, which is understanding how they're comparing to the benchmark, in particular the True Benchmark. This organization is obviously using True Benchmark. So I think like the key learnings here is that really understanding beyond the numbers, to be really data-driven, is to look beyond the numbers and to understand how you're doing in comparison to the rest of the organization via the benchmark. And to really also understand that's a very objective way of looking at how you're doing, and comparing as a manager, comparing the performance of a driver to the rest of the organization is really where you should be focusing, not just on the score.
Absolutely, and I think we'll go into a little bit more detail in a few minutes about how the benchmark plays a big part in how we generate priorities and strengths. For now, we'll just do a quick, basically commercial break, show you what we've been working on over the last few weeks here and what you can now use in the product now. So a big innovation that we've had is the idea of highlighted comments. What we're doing here is we're trying to surface, especially if you have a lot of comments, the things that might be most important to look at now. And we take into account a few factors here. So when we look at a comment, we look at what score is also with the comment, and then we can see, okay, maybe this is someone who's particularly really satisfied or dissatisfied, and that's part of the context that we need. We also look at the length of the comment, and if the content is very long, then we can see, okay, someone's really put some thought into this, it's definitely worth looking at first. And also we look at what's in the actual content. So if people are saying things like, oh, we could, we should, then you have an idea that actually this is quite solution-oriented, and it's actually something that as a manager you might be able to action faster. So we highlight these, and then you will notice this on your comment section of your dashboard now.
I just want to make a quick comment on this comment. Yeah. But basically, we use Peakon internally at Peakon, and I have a team that reports to me. So I get a dashboard, and we're on a weekly frequency, which we love weekly frequency. So, and this made a significant difference for me as a leader in the organization to understand and to look at comments in a different way, right? Because I historically always looked at them from date range, right? But having the highlighted ones at the top, in particular around them being solution-oriented, I looked at things very differently from this perspective. So from a personal perspective, this really worked well for me.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be very helpful for, especially if you're an admin or higher up in the organization, right? You're not going to be able to go through and see all these hundreds of comments. So this is definitely going to be a help for you.
Good.
Okay. The next has been as a popular request. As soon as we launched actions, everybody said, well, how can we make sure people are really reminded to do the actions that they put into the system? So a simple addition that we've had, but hopefully should have a big impact, is that we will now remind managers when it's getting close to the deadline for an action they've committed to, both in the product and via an email. And the last one is for our organisations that are in multiple countries. Now, previously you could have a survey that was in a particular language, or you could leave it up to the employees to choose from a wide range of languages that we have. I think we're up to about 40 now. But what we've had a request for, and that we've now built into the product, is that they can select essentially 2 or 3 that are like the official business languages, and these are the choices that as an employee you can now choose from to take the survey in. Right, and that's the latest that we've had at Peakon. And now we're going to get back to, a quick reminder, as Petros is showing us here, that on the first week of every month you can go to the blog and you can see all these new features that we've been releasing, read more about them there. And now what is basically a very fundamental question, and this is essentially why we are doing Peakon, right? We're trying to answer this question, we're trying to help you answer this question: what should I do to increase the engagement of my team? And our methodology is basically all built around answering this question. Yeah. But to do this, we really need to answer 3 questions. There's 3 parts of this, or there's 3 questions that we answer with our methodology. So the first of these is generally what activities are known to promote engagement. The second of these are how satisfied with my team with the way we perform these activities. And the third is to what extent do these activities influence my team specifically? So from a general theoretical basis to what's really important to your team in particular. And the way this manifests itself on the dashboard is through priorities and strengths. And if you have a little bit of artistic license, you could say that there's been a 60-year journey that's led to the priorities and strengths that you see on your dashboard today. And we're just going to quickly whiz through this.
We're going to condense 60 years into 2 minutes, Michael Dean. That's impressive.
All
right.
So firstly, we'll start with the general theory that has gone into the driver framework. This is how we know that of all of the drivers, there's empirical research that has shown that they influence engagement. And this starts with Frederick Herzberg, who you're probably all familiar with if you've been to business school.
And this is one of Michael Dean's heroes, by the way, if you were wondering. Yeah. Like, we literally, you can't really see it now, behind us, there is a photo of Frederick Herzberg on our Copenhagen office wall.
A 3-meter high photo.
As soon as you walk in the door, you are greeted by Frederick Herzberg saying, "Cheers to employee engagement."
Not quite, but anyway.
Close.
The major insight that Herzberg gave us that has stuck with us really is that there are different things that promote job satisfaction to different things that promote dissatisfaction and vice versa. And these were grouped in his research into what he called hygiene and motivating factors. What's really stuck with us over the years is that this has been where we first kind of identified the importance of growth, accomplishment and recognition as needs for long-term motivation. So beyond things that we thought previously were the most important by far, which were the things that he deemed hygiene factors, so pay and company policy and the things like that. And this was all the way back in the 50s going into the 60s. And by the time you got to the 70s, we had our next couple of engagement heroes, these handsome chaps, Hackman and Oldham, with job characteristics model. And what they were really looking into was basically that jobs need to be designed so that the work itself is a source of motivation. So the work you're actually doing motivates you to want to do it rather than, say, the pride in working for the company or again, how much you're being paid and the like. But a big part of jobs that he thought drove this were jobs that had a visible outcome and jobs that we thought delivered a significant outcome. And what we get from this is basically the introduction of the concept of meaningful work. Now, meaningful work has been a massive topic ever since, but this is really the foundation of where we get it from. We also start to understand autonomy, and we also understand that recognition, it's not just about praise, but it's also about feedback. That's kind of where this understanding comes from. Now, the third of our kind of heroes here, and the third model, and actually my sort of personal favourite, if you have a personal favourite organisational psychology theory.
You do, for sure.
I do. These comes from these chaps, Ryan and DC. And their main theory is that all humans have 3 basic psychological needs, and we're essentially drawn to activities that fulfill these needs. So that's autonomy, competency, and relatedness. Their other argument that is very powerful and also gives us a great understanding of engagement, or as we're getting to the understanding of engagement, is that motivation is not a unitary concept, as they call it. So you're not either just demotivated or highly motivated. There are actually different types of motivation. So you can be what they would call autonomously motivated, where you're drawn to do things because there's something deep inside you that wants to do them, versus what they would call control motivation, which is like, I'm doing it because otherwise you will fire me, or I will not get paid, or the like. What really comes out of their theory is the importance of autonomy, but not just autonomy as the kind of separate driver that we have in Peakon, but also that all activities actually should be done in a way that support autonomy. So if you think about something that maybe sounds quite separate, but is something like doing career pathing for employees, if you turn up and you say, here's your yearly career path discussion, and I've got 2 choices for you. You can be a manager or you can move to software engineer level 5. And the person actually really has an ambition to go into, I don't know, product management or something of the like, this is an activity that, despite perhaps your best intentions, will have reduced their autonomy. Right?
Customer success, maybe they want to.
Maybe they want to go into customer success. Yeah. Indeed. And actually, it's not until the 90s that we get to the phrase employee engagement, which comes from another psychologist called William A. Kahn. And he based a lot of his research on the preceding theories that we've looked at. And then he tested it empirically and came up with this definition of engagement that we see on the right here, really about applying your full self, physically, cognitively, and emotionally. So that's a lot of the theory that's gone into Peakon's 14 drivers. And this is on a general level, so this is what affects all organisations and all people. But what we want to know really is, built on this, what do you need to do in your organisation and in your team? And to do that, once we've got these 14 drivers of engagement, we have a simple equation that's about the performance of the drivers times the impact of the drivers. So firstly, we're going to look at what this concept of driver performance is. And as Patrick said, really what we're basing this on is the difference to the benchmark. We're not just talking about high scores and low scores, because really the concept of high and low scores is you only get that from comparing to something.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And the drivers are not intended to be compared with one another because they're measuring completely separate things. So you're really looking at the difference to the benchmark here. So behind the scenes, as we're calculating priorities and strengths, we're looking at something that looks a little bit like this chart that we can see on the right here, but with all 14 drivers in. So we see here that actually the environment driver is the furthest away from the benchmark in terms of being negatively away from the benchmark. And so we give it a ranking like that. And so this is kind of how the first step we have for looking at which drivers are most important. The second part of it is the driver impact. So we know, as I mentioned, that all of these drivers have an influence on engagement, but now we're finding out specifically which of these drivers have the biggest influence in your organisation. Now there's a bit more complicated science that goes into this.
Wow.
The first part of it is known as cross-validated regularized linear regressions elastic net. Which don't ask me exactly what that means, but it's similar to correlation analysis, which most people will be familiar with, where essentially you would kind of plot a graph similar to, as you see on the right here, where we're looking at the engagement scores from a group of people, we're looking at the driver scores from that same group of people, and we're seeing whether there's a correlation between them, which is represented by the line here. Now, where this gets a lot more advanced in the Peakon world is this next graph, which we don't expect everybody to understand, and which is why we've got this nice we can show you at the top how we visualize this. So essentially what we're looking at here is all of these lines on the graphs, they're showing the strength of that correlation, right? And then we're looking at essentially how strong this correlation is, but in comparison to all the other organizations basically on Peakon, and how the drivers play out in all of them. And then what we can show you, and what we actually learn from this, is that if you're in this kind of the bottom bit of the bell curve, then you really have a particularly strong relationship between the driver and engagement in your team. Right? Then you're probably familiar with, at the top of this graph, you can see we have these little circles. And obviously we don't want to be giving managers in your organization horrendous looking charts like this. Yes. So instead we visualize them in these neat circles. So the circle on the left shows that it's not a particularly strong relationship between the driver and engagement. In the middle shows that it's kind of average. And then on the right, where the circles are really closely aligned, we see that there's a really strong alignment between the driver and with engagement.
So would you say here, Michael, that if you're looking just at the Venn diagrams or the circles, concentrating on the circles that are as close as being on top of each other is a really good place to look, because that's signifying the highest correlation between the driver and engagement? Yeah.
Yes, okay. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And really, this is all this that we've just kind of whizzed through in 10 minutes is kind of reflected back to you on your dashboard.
Yeah.
So when you see here that we have strengths, which are at the top, we've seen that you are performing above the benchmark, so you're kind of exceeding what would be expected for the demographics of a team like yours, and also that this is having a strong contributing factor to engagement. So this is kind of where we're telling people really you should kind of play to your strengths, really.
Yeah, exactly.
With priorities, the benchmark, it's really used not to kind of hit people over the head with, it's to say you have room for improvement. Like groups of employees that are of a similar makeup to yours have shown that it is possible to be at a higher level.
Yeah.
So there's room for you to improve it, and we know, based on that it has a large impact on engagement, that if you do improve in these areas, you will see an increase in your overall engagement score. Now, if you would like to dig into this in a bit more detail and see a big, thorough review of all the research that has gone into Peakon's 14 drivers and how we came to the questions that you're used to in the product, we've actually written all this up in a big, lovely looking white paper with a lot of photography of the Peakon team. And we'll even send you a hard copy if you like. We've got a few hundred in our London office, and if you're more of an iPad reading person, we can send it to you straight after this webinar or next week in PDF form.
Yeah, 60 years in the making.
Yes.
Yeah,
Indeed.
so that's good. All right, well.
And that was a whistle-stop tour of the science of engagement. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Michael, and I think quite useful, in particular around the explanation of how the impact is understood and correlated. So now is probably our most exciting part of the show is the Q&A session, because we love to hear what you think or what your questions are, what we can answer for you. So if there are any questions, please use the Q&A functionality again. It's on the bottom of the screen. Just click Q&A and then choose all attendees and panelists. If you don't want to just put in your first name so that we can say, hi, Janet, and answer the question, we would be happy to do that. So we asked a poll. Looks like we did ask maybe a poll, but about would you like a hard copy sent to you? About 10 people would like a hard copy. Great. And digital is fine. Great. So we will make sure we get both of those out to you.
Right, who's going to be brave and ask the first question?
Yeah.
Last time we had no questions for 10 seconds and then 20 questions. So.
Yeah. How was Wharton, Michael Dean?
It was great. It is a great conference.
Yeah.
The speakers there were fantastic. We heard from the CEO of General Motors, and you can just go to lunch. You sit on a lunch table, and you've got someone from the people analytics team at Google, someone from Philips, and wow, this doesn't happen every day.
Yeah. So this Wharton People Analytics, this conference was just in Philadelphia last week, and we attended. And Michael was there and did a presentation.
So, first question from Nicole, why use the organisation benchmark instead of the industry benchmark? I mean, really the reason we're doing this is that we believe for managers internally, you're kind of operating within the frame of sort of what's possible within your organisation, really. Whereas when you're kind of moving up to admin level or sort of C-level where you would be comparing yourself against the industry, you are looking at, you're doing exactly that. Right? And it's also kind of intuitively, maybe as you move your way up the organizational hierarchy, you kind of do that, right? As a C-level person, you probably compare the metrics in your organization of other metrics, like maybe your stock price or whatever, to other things outside your industry, or outside your business. Whereas when you're a line manager, you probably do look around and compare yourself to your peers.
Exactly.
I think that's kind of a fair comparison.
Yeah. Adrian asks us, would it be possible to add functionality to enable HR to review actions in one place or download rather than each manager profile? It's a great question. What we call that right now is contextual. It's in the context, basically, of the actions live in the context of this segment, for example. So I'm a manager, right? I have a segment manager, Patrick Cournoyer, all reports. I create my actions and they're visible there, but the main, let's say Michael is the main admin of the system, he would have to go to my specific segment to see my actions. I believe we are working on that potential solution. We've heard that request quite a few times, and so we'll look into that more and get some feedback for you. So totally understand the need for it, and we'll definitely provide that feedback to the product team.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Peakon. I have 100 people in the organisation, and strengths and weaknesses change almost every week. I guess it's because of the few users we have.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So. And first, thank you we love you too, that you say you love Peakon. Yeah, so you're saying about changing in focus. Like, how do you choose your focus basically on priorities and strengths, because they're changing? You know, one of the things that is a key is that priorities and strengths are really designed to change, because it is really representing the pulse of what's going on in your organization at that point. The size of your organization, where you're saying you have 100 employees, I don't think it's so much that. I think it's just that you're getting a lot of feedback. You probably have a decent participation rate, and you're probably having your employees respond quite a bit. So one thing we would say is, if you are having variances between priorities and strengths, there's no, I personally feel that the intent of having a high frequency survey is allowing employees to have a voice on a frequent and regular basis. I don't think that there is a responsibility that an organization is making action plans every single week based off of the results that they're getting every week. I think it's good to look at results over a month-long period, still have surveys weekly to allow for employees to provide feedback, but then look at your feedback over a month-long period, which will be about if you're on weekly, 4 rounds, and start seeing where your trend is and where your priorities and strengths are. I think it's a lot easier way to manage it, and I think communicating that to the organization is an important part.
Yeah, I agree, and I think a lot of the time the way we encourage people to use priorities and strengths is more like, okay, this would be how you would build your strategy for a month or two, right? Whereas
even a quarter,
and the things that you're kind of trying to fix now often come through the comments, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have another question about, is it possible to see managers' interactions with comments? We've had some good debates about this internally.
We have.
And the reason why we have not got this feature at the moment is purposefully because we actually believe that it's better for people not to see this, so it encourages everybody to interact with the feedback. For example, rather than like if someone gives feedback to our management team from our team, perhaps you acknowledge it, then maybe our CEO or someone else will look at it and say, oh, well, it's already been acknowledged, which actually, it's actually really nice as an employee to get multiple acknowledgements from many people. So I think this is something that we've thought about, and we're really looking to see if this is something that is a long-term need for people, and then we would probably go into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got time for one more question from Ennis. Hi, Ennis. Glad you're here. Thank you for saying I love listening to your updates and really enjoy hearing you discuss the different theories you apply in your data analysis. And Ennis is one of the smartest dressed people we've ever met. So hopefully we are doing you proud, Ennis. I don't have a suit on today, but have you guys considered your own YouTube channel that other managers could access and start conversations around? That is a brilliant idea, Ennis. And we will take it under advisement. I would love that. I'm sure Michael would as well. So thank you for that suggestion. And I think it would be good, why not have more conversations around engagement? That's what we're here to do. And so thank you. Very good, good suggestion. So thank you for that.
I think that's about
I think that is. That 30 minutes goes by fast with you, Michael Dean. But hopefully you enjoyed it. And thank you again for spending time. Those of you in America, thank you for coming to hear a little bit of us very early in the morning for you. And for the rest of our customers in Europe and the UK and just around the world, we have people logged in from around the world. We appreciate you taking time out of your day. Our next session is in late April.
Yeah, there you go, April 25th.
April 25th? Yeah, here we go. Thank you, Petros. Our next broadcast is April 25th. Until then, you can share any feedback with Petros. And he's just petros@peakon.com. And also, Petros will be in communication with you, getting the questions that we answered with the answers back to you. We'll also get to the white paper. And those who want a hard copy, we will get those out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we missed any questions, I'm sure we'll get an answer to you. And until we have that YouTube channel, you can go to the webinars part of our website and rewatch the highlights there.
And we're there. And next time, I promise a different color sweater. but still 2 redheads. So we're stuck with that. But thank you all again, and hope everybody has a nice holiday weekend. And yeah, see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.